Okay, we have a lot going on the board here. This is now for proteins. I'm not giving you a chemical list, or ingredients list rather, a chemical formula for proteins, but I am going to give you the ingredients or the elements that make up a protein. And notice that a carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, just as the other two compounds were composed of, but now we have nitrogen. We have nitrogen added. If you remember back in the prologue, right before we started doing all the notes, we talked about Earth formation and early atmospheres and so on. And the chemical compositions of the atmosphere of inorganic molecules was ammonia and methane and carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, water vapor. You had all these ingredients. You had all the C's and the O's and the H's and the N's all bound up in complicated and different molecules. And then looking at the Urey-Miller experiment, you saw that it was easy to break those bonds up and rearrange those bonds and form organic molecules and organic compounds. And that's where this comes in. That's where all this came about. Those amino acids, that brown goo that was inside Urey-Miller's experiment, that brown goo turned out to be majority of it amino acids. No amino acids existed on Earth before this, but after the processes were taking place on the Earth's atmosphere, when it formed and the heat and the temperature and all that established, you got amino acids. And amino acids are the basic building blocks of life. So not that life formed, like in the Urey-Miller experiment, but the ingredients that manufacture life, the ingredients that build life, were created very basic, very, very easily, very basic in a laboratory. So it probably occurs very frequently. And we have found a lot of amino acids. Earth itself has 20 different amino acids. All living things have at least some forms of those 20 amino acids. We have found a 21st, a 22nd, and I believe a 23rd amino acid on Earth, but they were found in meteorites. They came from outer space. So amino acids not only can form on the Earth, they also formed out in space. And we've seen amino acids in deep sky clouds, deep clouds in the universe, nebulous, gigantic gas clouds, having amino acids inside these clouds. So amino acids can form in space very easily. Amino acids on Earth maybe didn't form on Earth. Maybe amino acids on Earth came to Earth during the bombardment period of the asteroids and the comets. Maybe the amino acids were formed deep out in our solar system and brought in by the comets. How about that? That means the amino acids that your body has, or the program to build those amino acids, came from extraterrestrial amino acids. I'm not saying aliens. I'm saying amino acids that were not on the Earth at the time of Earth's formation, but were brought to the Earth by comet bombardment, by asteroidal bombardment hitting the Earth. Think about that one. That's kind of cool. All right, so let's take a look at proteins. So the basic building block for a protein is something called an amino acid. This is my amino acid. I've enlarged it for you. It's made up of a few groups. You have what is called the amino group. That's the N and the H2. That's the amino group here. And a carboxyl group at the end that makes it an acid. Amino acid. That's where the name comes from. The in-between, in the middle, you have a certain region on the center carbon that I call it R. R is a variable. So that just means there are 20 different things that can fit there, turning this into 20 different amino acids. It could be another atom. It could be a hydrogen. It could be another whole molecule that's just linked to this structure. So it can be incredibly complex, or it can be very, 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 very basic. Whatever the case is that you have 20 different variations that can fit there, turning this into 20 different amino acids. Yes, the 21st, second, and the third amino acid also have different orientations. We're not going to concern ourselves with those in this course, so we're just going to focus on the 20. So what you need to know is that there are 20 different variations that can fit there, turning this into 20 different types of amino acids. And each amino acid is important for life, and I would say most of the amino acids will be found in life. In other words, you will find the same amino acids in humans as you will in a blade of grass, as you will in a bacteria, as you will in a salmon or a shark or blue-green algae. You will find same amino acids. Maybe not the same number, maybe not the amount, maybe not all 20, but you will find amino acids that match amino acids in your body and in other structures. I think, you might look this up for me, but I think a pistachio nut actually contains all 20 amino acids inside. So when you eat a pistachio nut, you will be putting in the basic building blocks into your system so you can then manufacture proteins from that. Okay. What I have going on over here, can you recognize it? Oh, I know it's printed up there. I have two simple amino acids. There's going to be an enzyme involved. It's going to be what's called a protease because it's going to work on proteins. So the protease is going to come in, and that's just a name. That's like me saying car. There are so many different variations of car. There are so many different variations of proteases. You have a pepsin, and you have a trypsin, and a whole bunch of others. So we just group them together. Proteases, they work on proteins. So you got a protease that comes in, works on the two amino acids, removes water, and I'll show you how in a second, removes water from the two amino acids, links the two amino acids, then they get a complex amino acid structure called a protein, and the water is freed. That's dehydration synthesis, just like you saw in lipids, just like you saw in sugars. It's a repeating process. It works. So it's used over and over again for variations. Now, where does this happen? Well, in the first amino acid, the action is going to take place on the last carbon in the OH group. And in the second amino acid, the action is going to take place on one of the hydrogens on the nitrogen end, the second nitrogen end. So I tried to show you that where the black and red bonds are, those are the two bonds that were open on the nitrogen and the carbon. They joined up, and then water was removed on the outside. So I enlarged it here. So if you look here, I got an OH group, and I have a hydrogen group here. The enzyme removes that hydrogen, see it's missing, and it removes the OH, see it's missing, and allows the bonds of the open bond of carbon and the open bond of nitrogen to join. They link. See, they linked here. I enlarged it a little bit, made it a little easier to see. That's called a peptide bond. That's a special type of bond. The bond that links two amino acids together is called a peptide bond. Okay? The linkage, the thing that the two bonds that link the two different amino acids together is called a peptide bond. So I have a peptide bond here that linked two amino acids together. That structure, two amino acid structure, it's called a dipeptide. It's a dipeptide structure. Okay? It is two amino acids held together by one peptide bond, dipeptide. If I have a polypeptide, multiple greater than two, that's a large protein chain. That would be a protein chain. This is a very basic protein. But proteins can be 500, 1,000, 2,000 amino acid sequences long. That means every one of those amino acids must be peptide bonded to the next amino acid to build a huge chain. I think blood is 500 proteins long. One blood cell is 500 amino acids, linked together in a certain sequence to make a red blood cell. Now, there are special proteins that I want to get to, and we mentioned them all throughout this review, and they are called enzymes. But now I want to do a little bit more of a detail on how an enzyme actually works. Okay, there's a lot going on in this board here. We're looking at a special protein now called an enzyme. Enzymes are classified as catalysts. A catalyst is a structure that causes a chemical reaction to occur faster than it normally would, and it is not changed by the reaction itself. So it moves in, causes a reaction to take place, moves on to do it again, and again, and again, and again, and again. It keeps doing this. It keeps doing this. So a catalyst causes a chemical reaction to occur faster than normal, and it's unchanged by the reaction itself. That's a catalyst. It's exactly what an enzyme is. So an enzyme works on something called a substrate. A substrate is a substance, hear the words, substrate, substance, that the enzyme works on. And they're substrate specific. They are designed like a puzzle piece. They're only designed to fit a specific type of molecule. Any other molecule trying to fit into the enzyme will not fit into the enzyme. If it did, it wouldn't work. It wouldn't stimulate the enzyme to do anything. It just wouldn't do anything. So they're enzyme to substrate specificity. They're specific to the substrate. They all end, when you're reading about enzymes, the wording for an enzyme ends in ACE, A-S-E. Remember, sugars end in OSE, O-S-E. So whenever you hear something like lipase, helicase, deoxyribase, ribase, lipase, protease, glucase, fructase, sucrase, maltase, these are all enzymes that work on the specific substrates. Now, the first part of the word, let's take the word sucrase. The prefix, sucre, is what it works on. So sucrase works on sucrose. Maltase works on maltose. Glucase works on glucose. Fructase works on fructose. You get the picture? Can you hear it goes? Protease, now that doesn't work on proteose. There's no proteose. Protease works on a protein. Protease, protein. Lipase works on lipids. Deoxyribase works on deoxyribose. Ribase, ribose, and so on. So that's how enzymes are identified. ASE endings are enzymes. Okay? Now, the way the enzyme functions is this thing called lock and key theory. So a very simple diagram shows the enzyme in structure with a specific design. This is called the active site. That puzzle-fitting piece, that puzzle-fitting structure is called the active site. So this here on the enzyme, right here, is active site. That's where the action takes place. That's where the bonds are removed. The atoms are removed to create the bonds, so the atoms fit together. When I'm talking about that in the other films, the other video, well, my age, the other videos, you would see the enzyme would fit like a puzzle piece. Then there's a region where the bonds break open. That's the active site. That happens all inside of here. That happens all inside of here. So here's my enzyme and my substrate. I'm going to go in this direction first. So now let's look at enzymes in a specific job. So we have something called a lock and key theory. And a lock and key theory basically outlines how an enzyme functions on its substrate. Remember, the substrate is what the enzyme works on. It's the substance that the enzyme works on. The substrate is the substance the enzyme works on. Okay, you hear the sounding? The substrate is the substance that the enzyme works on. And the enzyme is substrate specific. It's specifically designed for a certain type of molecule. If there are 30,000 different types of molecules, there has to be 30,000 different types of enzymes to work on them. They are literally that specific. They have their one-to-one relationship that the enzymes have to what they break down. It's very, very complex, but that's how they work. So I'm trying to simplify it here. I made a very simple enzyme with a puzzle fitting structure here, and I have the substrate with its negative, meaning it's the opposite design. In other words, here it goes down and in, this one goes up and out. Okay? But they fit as together like a puzzle piece. So I'm going to work my process this way. So as my enzyme and my substrate come together, they form what is called the enzyme substrate complex. That's what this is. We're going to go in this direction. So at the active site, what's happening is water is being broken down, and the substrate is being broken down, and the water, the pieces of the water, are filling in the open bonds. Now, what is that doing to the substrate? It's breaking it down. It's causing it to become smaller. Think of this as maltase and maltose. So I have maltase and maltose coming together to form a maltase-maltose complex. That's the enzyme substrate complex. Water is being added as maltose bonds are being broken apart. So now maltose is being broken down into two glucose molecules. Two glucose molecules when the water pieces are attached. So you get two simple structures at the end of this reaction. Notice the enzyme was unchanged at every stage. That's why it's a catalyst. makes a reaction work faster than normal, and it's unchanged by the reaction. So here I added water to the system, causing the complex molecule to break down, and you get two simple molecules at the end. The water pieces were added to the open ends of the bonds here. Maltase becomes glucose-glucose. Sucrose. I know I said maltase. I meant to say maltose. Maltose breaks down and becomes glucose and glucose. Sucrose, when worked on by sucrase, the enzyme, will become glucose and fructose at the end. Well, let's go in the other direction now. So now I have, let's say, I have two monosaccharides. I have glucose, let's say, and fructose.